Hello and welcome everyone to another edition of the ASCA Weekly Podcast. I am your host, Charles Fallon, back in here with another episode of this, talking about everything that just went down in the streets of Computerville, the ASCA's backyard, of course, hometown soil, all the action at that 4 Mile road course, and yet again another dominant week that it was for Ronnie Woods Motorsports. But before we get into the show, I'd be remiss if I did not shout out the sports premier partners, Rowdy Energy. Click the link on the ASCA's link tree, the first link to go shop and find your favorite flavor of that refreshing energy drink. And also, Circle B Diecast Plan B sales. If you want to get free shipping on any orders $20 or over in the United States, use code ASCA at checkout to receive that discount. So shout out to Rowdy Energy and Circle B Diecast as always. So obviously, like I said, we're going to be talking about everything that went down at the streets of Computerville. And yet again, what a week it was for Ronnie Woods Motorsports. And of course, we'll start with the main talking point, the topic of discussion, the Subway Grand Prix. And really, what a performance it was from Shane Park. 23 years old, but he drove like a 33-year-old out there. Just the way that he handled that race, his racecraft, he just drove with so much finesse out there. It's really hard to describe, if you're a newer viewer, kind of sitting back and watching what Park did. But if you go back and look at these road course races from, the past couple years or so, especially I'd like to go back to 2022 Amp Energy 200, the week that he had signed that massive $30 million contract to join Ronnie Woods Motorsports in 2023. He had the dominant car that day. He led 62 laps, but with 19 laps to go, Nick Orchidi was all over his back bumper, and Park made a mistake, blocked up into turn one, cost himself the race that day. Then you go to last year's Subway Grand Prix. He had the dominant car. Well, he did not have the dominant car in that race, but he qualified on pole and led all the early laps until he once again locked up into turn one, made a mistake. Randall Wood drove by off into the sunset, and the rest is history. So you really kind of tell that Park was under pressure. He was having issues, really, keeping his composure and not making mistakes. And whatever happened, I guess something clicked at the 2023 Amp Energy 200 where, under pressure, 15 laps to go, Park is catching Todd Kidd, and he pulls this amazing crossover. I believe it was Kidd that ended up locking up and missing the corner, and Park ended up driving by and winning the race. And that's his veteran teammate that, he pulled that move on. Kidd's 27 at the time, Park was 22. Kidd has a bunch more experience than Shane Park does, 5 years more experience than Park does. And he still, outboxed him at the end to get his first career win. And then in this race, Laquan Scranton looked like early on he had the car to beat, but Park was just kind of holding off, kind of waiting, biding his time. Didn't want to use up his stuff too early. When Scranton was pressuring him early on for the lead, Park was like, hey, if you want to lead, go ahead, be my guest, use up your stuff. I'll wait back here and watch you do it. I'll just try to keep tabs on you. And you can kind of tell towards once we were catching the first round of green flag stops, that's when Park really started to make some inroads on Scranton's lead. And then we had the caution for Bennett and Jackson. And then, from after that, they made a slight adjustment on the pit stop, slight air pressure adjustment to make the car fire off better. And that 24 car was just unstoppable from there. He was hounding Scranton from the lead on the restart. And then eventually, finally, Scranton cracked under the pressure, locked up heading into the hairpin. And the rest, as they say, is history. So Park wins his second career Ajax Cup Series race, his second straight on a road course, the first driver to win back-to-back road races since Nick Urquidy did so way back in 2016 when he swept the road courses. And I think we are witnessing a new king of road courses in the ASCA. Because, I mean, look at it. Shane Park has finished no worse than second in its last four road racing starts. No worse than second. He's led laps in all four of those races. I mean, the kid has got this thing figured out. And, it's weird to talk about someone else other than Nick Urquidy dominating on road courses like this. But he learned from Nick Urquidy. He learned by losing to Urquidy and Randall Woods. And he learned from his mistakes, cracking under pressure of those guys to, put other guys like Todd Kidd and Laquan Scranton under that same pressure and rise up when it matters most, come up clutch. And now here he is winning back-to-back road courses. And more importantly, for the first time in his Cup career, Shane Park leads the point standings right now by 4 over Todd Kidd. And I look at this 24 team and I think we'll find out for sure if they're legit championship contenders, but I do know that over the course of the next few weeks, I'd say watch out for these guys because I think they're going to be at the top of the standings for quite a bit. I mean, you look at the races from here until the All-Star break in mid-April. We got West Virginia next week. Park is rather hit or miss there. The Stone Yard, Park one pole in the Ayers 100, led the first 88 laps of this race last year. I think he finished like sixth or something at the end. Something close to that. He fell off towards the end. He lost the track position, but that car was bad fast early on. Then you look at Disney. He led laps there, believe brought home a top 5 finish. But he was also fast there, led laps. Then they move on to Belltown. He was fast there in the season finale, at least, and then he got taken out, I believe, by Laquan Scranton after he blew an engine and then spun in the oil. Okay, he was running third when that happened. And then the Michigan road course, I mean, are you picking anyone else at a road course other than Shane Park right now? The guy who has not even a 2.0, a 1.5 average finish in his last 4 road racing starts. So, I mean, I don't know how you can pick against Shane Park right now. He's done an incredible job, and this kid is really something special. And I think Ronnie Woods Motorsports, that gamble that they made to pull him away from Snoots Enterprises, pull him out of Greg Healy's shadow, it's already paying off because in 18 starts with the team, he's won more races than Doug Bowden had in 4 years with the team. And Bowden just happened to stumble upon one lucky win at Ajax Super Speedway, while Park is legit winning races, dominating races at road courses. So I'd certainly say that RWM so far is getting the better end of the deal. And let's just talk about the organization as a whole right now. They have it rolling. Them and Chevrolet as a whole have it rolling, but specifically Ronnie Woods Motorsports, that is now 6 straight victories for Ronnie Woods Motorsports in the ASCA in general. And that's, of course, including the duels. If you don't want to include the duels, it's 4 straight points paying victories. They're the first team in ASCA history to sweep a clean sweep of the first 2 weeks with, of course, Colin Ward in the Craftsman Series. And we're going to get to that wild, wacky, wet Craftsman Series race in a second. But, they swept the first 2 weeks with Colin Ward in the Craftsman Series. And then you got Kidd and Park and Cup. And they have 3 cars in the top 5 in points right now. Of course, unfortunately for Ross Jackson, he's dead last in points, which is kind of a big problem. While his other 2 teammates are, top 2 in the standings. So he's got his work cut out for him, to say the least. He's had a miserable start to the season. But yeah, Ronnie Woods Motorsports has it rolling right now. And, a lot of people have been critical about their investment in some of these young drivers. There was a lot of talk about, did they make the right decision bringing in Shane Park? Having to pay him Todd Kidd money when the guy had never even won a race in his career, and never even brought home a 10 points finish to date. And I'd say that gamble already is paying off and then some. And then, of course, promoting Ross Jackson up to the 88. The jury's still out on Jackson, but we'll see on that one. Todd Kidd has, of course, developed into a superstar. And then you look at even the 48 car, they got Bryn Renner right now, but they potentially have a guy even better than Bryn Renner coming up through the ranks and Colin Ward. And Colin Ward is truly, he is an incredible talent. He is probably, I, it's tough to say this, but he might be the most polished Craftsman Series prospect I've ever seen. And there's a difference between raw talent and already being polished. And, like when I look at a Laquan Scranton or Chris Barrymore when they were coming up through the ranks, I see raw talent. And guys with that much raw talent, they end up in Cup at 19 years of age. Same thing for Diego Ortiz. But these are guys that are so boom or bust that you don't know. I think Colin Ward is a sure thing, as sure as it gets when it comes to these prospects. He is so polished. He rarely, if ever, makes mistakes. The only, critical one I can think of since he joined Ronnie Woods Motorsports is his little hiccup at West Virginia, where he got loose underneath Felix Anderson last year and took out himself and Anderson and Ian Romo as well. But other than that, he's been mistake free. You know, he is an incredible talent. He's incredible at play racing, incredible at road courses. He can win at short tracks. You saw he dominated at Disney last year. He can win a mile and a half. What can't this guy do, honestly? Like Colin Ward has the potential. He's just a winner. I think that's really the best way you can put it. The guy is just a winner. And you put him in anything, he will win races, especially, a team as good as Ronnie Woods Motorsports. And he's starting to shut up some people that were saying, oh, he only won the title last year because he was in an illegal car. Well, what do you have to say about him winning the first two races of the season? I don't care about how much of a crapshoot those races are. Back-to-back wins to open a new season is back-to-back wins, So he's incredible. And talking about this week's Pilot Flying J100, I think Todd Kidd summed it up best. What the hell did we watch in the Pilot Flying J100? Because I still don't know. It was something like that. It's one of the best, worst Craftsman races that I've ever seen in my life. And just beginning from the start, Jared Ayers completely misses turn one, skids directly into the back of Laquan Scranton, takes the top two heavy favorites out of the race. That's how the race starts. And we knew that rain was going to be coming. And of course, it did end up coming. But, that's how the race started. So you knew after that it was going to be wacky. And then on the ensuing race start, Tommy Woods wheel hops underneath Jack Ayers, nearly takes them both out. Woods had a horrible day at the office. Also got a speeding penalty late, but somehow still battled back to a top 10 finish. So shout out to him at least, salvaging his awful day with the top 10. Seemed like he had a car that could have won the race, but obviously that mistake on that ensuing restart really put him back, and he never really recovered from that. Yeah, so then but we stayed green, and then the rain finally did start to fall. First, it was sprinkling, and Ayers pitted, but he put on slicks. If he had put on wets at that point, I think he ends up winning this race. But I don't know why his crew chief just thought, maybe the rain would dissipate. Maybe it was just a pop up shower, no big deal. But yeah, that clearly didn't happen. And yeah, so he had to pay the price for that one. Putting on the slicks, he had to come back in and pit again just a few laps later. So that was dumb. And then it started full on downpouring, and Graham Darty, Nick Painter, big names for going a lap down. Colin Ward was just handling business. It was just another Friday afternoon drive for him. Just handling business, doing his thing. He's done an incredible job. Um, using that dirt racing acumen that he has, that road racing experience, combining it both together, and you get what could be the best rain racer in the ASCA. I know it's high praise, but we have never seen these Ajax Cup guys race in the rain. And hopefully, crossing my fingers that we do get to see that at like Michigan or something later this year, because I think the Cup guys would have a much better time handling it than these Craftsman guys. A lot of these guys, especially the rookies out there, like Ian Adonde and those types, they just didn't have the experience. Chad Nelson's another one. They didn't have the experience, in general, racing in these stock cars, let alone racing in the rain on a road course. So, it's tough. And then, as soon as the downpour started, Lance Davidson piled into the back of Dustin Adams, took them both out of contention. Then we get going for the ensuing restart. And as I mentioned earlier, Ina Donde, who was having a fantastic run, he was up in second place. This is a rookie that had never seen this track before. He was up in second place with a chance to win, bump drafting Colin Ward down the front straightaway. And then he locks up and goes straight off the track into a pole. So his second race, his second runner-up result went out the window just like that. And I mean, that's road course racing, that's rain racing for you. You cannot push too hard, or bad things like that will happen. It's a shame, but it is what it is. That's just, it's part of it. And then I think the issue was going to try to keep the race green, but then Chad Nelson wheel hopped entering turn one. He spun, took out Toby Beckett, and also collected Adam Petty Jr. So Nelson and Petty Jr. had terminal damage, and then Bob Halford, he was like, "We've seen enough. This is no, we can't do this. Y'all are embarrassing us. You're embarrassing yourselves. You're embarrassing the sport." And these guys were down horrendously outside of basically Colin Ward and Brian Dixon. But yeah, that's basically it. Ward led all 25 laps, and there you go. So, yeah, shout out to Colin Ward. We just talked about him for about 5 minutes there. I mean, like I said, the kid's such a polished talent. There's really no weakness to his game, and I have a hard time believing, that he's going to lose this year's Craftsman Championship. I mean, he's already up by double digits over Marcus Edwards, and like I said, there's just no weakness to his game. So it looks like Nick Douglas's pick of the Craftsman champion will be spot on this year. And I believe I picked Colin Ward before the season started as well. So looking like that's going to be spot on as the cream continues to rise to the crop. As the cream continues to rise to the top early on in these Craftsman Series events. But I think we're going to segue a little bit to talk about Jared Ayers. We talked about him a little bit there in the previous segment, but Jared Ayers has quietly become the new bad guy, the villain of the ASCA, if you will. He has found himself in a lot of incidents, a lot of controversy, specifically over the course of the past 3 or 4 years or so. And that only escalated further with his incident with Laquan Scranton. And then he got into some fisticuffs with Lucas Sambert in the cup race. He didn't get into the back of Sambert or anything, but it was this payback from last year when obviously Ayers locked up heading into turn one and completely flipped Sambert over, took out Nick Carey as well. So that was a little bit of payback by Sambert entering the hairpin, and Ayers ended up finishing 11th in that one. But Jared Ayers is in quite the predicament right now. Like I said, he is the ASC's most hated driver. I would say, even surpassing Diego Urquidy at this point, which is shocking. And the problem is, at least with Urquidy, when he was hated, he was still winning races. Ayers is not doing that. He can come close, he can lead laps, he can win poles, but he can't close the deal. I mean, he's done it twice. He has 2 career wins, but his last win was in 2022. So it's like This is a guy in Michael Racing Equipment. Randall Woods just won more races last season than Ayers has in his entire career. So obviously, Michael White said in the offseason that he wanted to have a serious talk with his successor in the number 20. And so far, I question to see if it's working. Ayers is still being way too aggressive in these races, and in the Craftsman race, both Craftsman races, you could argue that he wrecked the field. Um, he took out the leader. Obviously, that one's not even a question. Locking up and taking out Laquan Scranton at the start of the race on Friday. But then, also in the season opener, through a bad block on Cameron Atwood, gets dumped, flips over in front of the field, and all hell breaks loose. So it it's a tough situation for Ayers, and luckily for him, he still got 14 races to clean up his act, but he's got a target on his back right now, and he has a lot of drivers in the garage against him. He's got a lot of fans against him. He's got a lot of pundits against him, and I question, um, how much longer is Michael White Racing got to hold out on this guy? Obviously, they have him signed through 2026, so they're committed to him for the next 3 years minimum. But how much more can they take of this before they're like, all right, this is enough. I'm done. With this is ridiculous. We're done here. And I think that we may come to that point sooner or later if Ayers cannot start winning races. So this is a big opportunity for him, West Virginia. We'll talk about him more in a second, but he's got a big opportunity to redeem himself this week. So we'll see if he's able to do so. Next, we're going to be talking about a topic that we brought up early in or midway through last week's podcast, and that is the big names and the big holes that we mentioned could be a possibility for guys that aren't road ringers that were involved in the Ajax 200 big one. What did I tell you? I told you Norm Luster, Greg Healy, Ross Jackson, watch out for them, because if they can't bring home top 10 finishes, they'd be down horrifically. And look at where they are in points right now: 19th, 20th, and dead last. So they're in a world of hurt right now. But luckily, I think for all three of these guys, I'm sure they are more than pleased that West Virginia is the next race on the calendar. You finally go to a normal track, a real racetrack, as Jared Ayers would say. Um, so we finally returned to a normal track. So these guys will have a much better opportunity to, kind of recover a bit. Um, I think Healy is the best bet to recover. Obviously the 2022 champion, he's proven that he can do it before. He's won at West Virginia before, won the 2022 West Banco 250. Um, he's led laps here before, he's qualified in pool here before. I'd say he is the safest bet to recover this week and really have a big bounce back race and kind of continue to right his season, if you will. So, it's tough, but I think Lester also has a really good shot as well. He's led laps here before as well. The guy I'm most worried about is actually Ross Jackson. And it's weird saying that considering Ronnie Woods Motorsports has won everything this season. Literally everything. All the Bourne Spring races, everything but the Ajax 200 pole and the Intel shootout. They've won everything else. But I'm concerned about Ross Jackson because this 88 team has had their struggles on these bigger tracks. And this has always been a problem with Jimmy Hood, that he, especially later on in his career, he would struggle at Computer and he'd struggle at West Virginia, especially. He was awful here. And, Jackson wasn't amazing at West Virginia last year either. So he needs a top five run. He needs to be up front. He needs to be leading laps. And I question if that's going to happen for him. Hopefully it does so that he can start to write his season around. And this is a guy that's going to be on an expiring contract next season. So he needs to perform, obviously, if he wants an extension in this number 88, so we'll see. But keep an eye on the 3, the 19, and the 88 again this week because desperate times call for desperate measures, and their championship hopes are hanging in the balance right now. They could easily fall off a cliff if any one of them DNF this week. I'd say write them off as title contenders already. And I know it sounds strange, but it's not looking good for them. We'll just put it that way. And then another Ronnie Woods Motorsports topic. This is basically a freaking Ronnie Woods Motorsports podcast at this point. But this was also revealed. This was also revealed this morning, actually, that Bryn Renard, the veteran at Ronnie Woods Motorsports, he's been in the number 48 since 2012, the 2012 Craftsman Series champion. He's not returning to the team in 2025. And I mean, we just talked about Colin Ward. We all saw this one coming, basically. It's really a surprise that he even got the extension to return to the team in 2024. But so Renner is done with Ronnie Woods Motorsports after this season. He will hit the open market for the first time in his career. And I think he is easily shaping up to be the hottest commodity to hit the free agent market right now. Because Urquidy just signed the extension to get his deal done, and Renard was the biggest name on an expiring contract. So, I would say a lot of guys are going to be looking at Bryn Renard and saying, hey, can we bring him into this team? Can he help us out? Can he win races for us? And by win races, I mean more than one race a season. You question if he's been getting the best stuff at Ronnie Woods Motorsports, if they've been spread thin too much with the elite level drivers that he's had to work with in the past. I mean, you look at Jimmy Hood, Randall Woods, Todd Kidd now. Shane Park is looking really good. He's been kind of in the shadows of all those guys and kind of been overlooked, forgotten about. He's finished runner-up in points before. He's won all 3 Crown Jewel races. He just has yet to really put it together for a full season or, for more than one season at a time, basically. But he's going to be 33 next year. So it's a gamble on Bryn Renard. Like, you know what you're getting, but do you really? Because he might be regressing here coming up soon. I don't know where he ends up. I know that a lot of teams are going to be taking a look at this guy. I think Urquidy Birds Racing is certainly in the mix. I think Taylor Motorsports, we're hearing grumblings that they might be considering full-time racing in 2025. I think they certainly need to take a look. He could honestly end up anywhere. So I don't know where he goes. I think Snoots Enterprises also is another team that needs to take a look. If they don't decide to bring back Bryce Mann, which right now I'd certainly say they're leaning towards not doing so. With the start that Mann has had to the season. So, I don't know what's going to happen with the 48. Well, we do know what's going to happen with the 48 next year. Colin Ward's obviously getting promoted, but we don't know what's going to happen with Bryn Renard. So where does he end up? That's a saga that I think is going to really dictate all of what happens throughout silly season. Like the first domino to fall will be where Renard ends up. And yeah, so Renard is easily the hottest commodity in free agency this season. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how the whole process with him plays out. Then our final topic of this edition of the ASCA Weekly Podcast is previewing West Virginia, the first, full downforce, regular racetrack. This is where the quote unquote real season begins. No plate race, no road courses. This is where we're going to really get to see how good the Chevy ZL1 1LE truly is. If they actually did get the downforce right on that car, we're going to get to see who the real championship contenders and pretenders are. We think it's Shane Park and Todd Kidd right now, but it's way too early to say that. Who's going to be this year's Cameron Atwood, the guy that comes out and dominates on all these high downforce, high speed downforce types of tracks. who's going to be that guy to step up? And I think the guy that I'm looking at um, profusely right now as that guy is actually Todd Kidd. And I know, he's second in points right now. He's already won a race, but Todd Kidd, his finishes at West Virginia last year were first and sixth. But in that sixth place finish in last year's West Banco 250, he won the pole and led the most laps. His car just fell off at the end of the run. So if they can, correct whatever went wrong at the end of that race, I think he's got a legit shot, um, to really kind of bounce back and get another win potentially, continue this Ronnie Woods Motorsports dominance. I think another guy to watch is certainly Diego Urquidy, the most recent West Virginia winner, one of only two multi-time West Virginia winners with, of course, Randall Woods. I mean, who else would be the other multi-time West Virginia winner? Chris Barrymore, I think, is a guy that's not getting talked about enough as a real threat to win at West Virginia. We all know he loves ripping the fence, and the groove has aged so much at West Virginia that ripping the fence is actually super fast these days. I think watch out for him. I think Laquan Scranton is also another threat. I don't know if he's got a race winning car, but he's another guy that really loves to rip the fence, get right up there, push it to the edge. So I expect him to do some big things in this race as well. Nick Orchidi, I think, is another guy that's going to be able to mix it up at the front. I'm shocked that Orchidi is not one of West Virginia race because he's been really good here under the radar. He just normally gets some bad luck at the end. I know he led the most laps in 2020 at this race, and he ended up losing it. He finished 2022 is also fast here. He lost it on a restart, and the rest is history. But I think Nick Ortiz is also going to be a big threat to watch out for. And do I think the Ronnie Woods Motorsports streak continues? The Chevrolet winning streak continues? I don't. I do not think it continues actually. And one other guy to watch for, I of course completely forgot to mention, is Cameron Atwood. Gotta watch out for Cameron Atwood, reigning champion. Finished second the last time we were here, although we did finish 10th in the Little General 200 earlier in the season last year, but that was more so because he had a pit road penalty early on and just never really recovered. But Cameron Atwood, I mean, that's obvious, defending champion, gotta watch out for him. But I do not think the Bow Tie Brigade continues their winning ways. The Ronnie Woods Motorsports dominance must come to an end at some point, right? I'm sure a lot of people are waiting for that to happen, reading patiently. And I think it does happen this week. Um, who ends up winning? I really don't know. But I'm going to go with my gut here. My gut's saying Chris Barrymore. So I'm going to pick Chris Barrymore to win this race. He won it in 2022. He's come close numerous times. He led the most laps in 2021, led the most laps in 2023, won the race in 2022. The guy's due to win another one of these West Virginia events, and he hasn't won a race since Denver in 2022. Which it's crazy to believe it's been that long since he last went to victory lane. But yeah, so I'm gonna go with Chris Barrymore to win. He's got a lot to prove this year, and he's gonna need to start off with a bang. So I say he gets the job done this week and finally puts Ford on the board back in victory lane in a points pan race this season. So that's it for this edition of the ASC Weekly Podcast. Once again, shout out to our premier partners at the ASCA and Rowdy Energy and Circle B Diecast. And we will be back next week to cover all the West Virginia action for you right here on the ASC Weekly Podcast. Hopefully, we can get another edition of the Fallon Corner up soon as well. So this is Charles Fallon signing out. We'll see you next week.